What would you do if you received an email from your future self detailing exactly how your life falls apart? I stared at the glowing screen in my pitch-black room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sender address was undeniably mine, but the timestamp claimed it was sent 10 years from now. It was impossible, insane even, yet the first line possessed a secret no one else possibly knew. At 30 years old, my reality was a shattered mess of broken dreams and empty bank accounts. I had just lost a job I thought was secure, plunging me into a depression so deep I could barely leave my mattress. Day merged into night, the world moving on without me while I drowned in a sea of unwashed laundry and self-pity. I was completely, utterly lost and entirely hopelessly broken. Then came that first mysterious message, cutting through my despair like a cold blade. The email did not offer comfort or warm words of encouragement, but instead laid out a brutal, clinical assessment of my failures. It claimed that if I did not change my trajectory immediately, the miserable existence I was living would become my permanent reality. It demanded absolute obedience to a set of strange daily instructions. The very first command was simple, but agonizing for someone in my mental state. I had to wake up at 5 in the morning, put on running shoes, and step outside. There was no marathon required, just the physical act of greeting the dawn. If I failed, the email warned, the future version of me would disappear, taking away any chance of escaping the suffocating darkness of my current life. That first morning was a battle against my own heavy limbs and an exhausted mind. I rolled out of bed shivering, questioning my sanity for following orders from a digital ghost. Yet, as the cold morning air hit my face, a tiny spark of defiance ignited within my chest. For the first time in months, I had accomplished a goal, however small, before the rest of the city even stirred. Soon, the demands became increasingly difficult and entirely uncomfortable. A new message arrived ordering me to spend 3 hours a day learning a complex coding language I knew absolutely nothing about. My brain fought the dense information, frustration bringing me to the edge of tears on multiple occasions. But the emails kept coming, relentless and unforgiving, pushing me through the mental fog whenever I felt like slamming my laptop shut. The hardest task arrived a few weeks later, striking directly at my crippling social anxiety. The mysterious sender instructed me to go to a local coffee shop and initiate a conversation with a complete stranger about business. I sat in a booth for 2 hours, sweating and trembling, before finally forcing myself to speak to the man at the next table. That terrifying conversation eventually led to my first freelance client. A strange momentum began to build, slowly replacing my deep depression with a quiet, burning focus. These small, deeply uncomfortable actions were acting like medicine, chipping away at the walls of my isolation. I was too exhausted from the rigorous daily schedule to entertain the dark thoughts that used to consume me. The ghost from the future was forcing me to live in the present, demanding my full and undivided attention. There were moments when anger overtook me, times I screamed at the empty room demanding answers. I typed furious replies, asking for lottery numbers or proof of this impossible time travel nonsense. The responses were always delayed but chillingly precise, ignoring my tantrums and gently reminding me of my own deepest fears. The sender knew my psychological triggers perfectly, manipulating my pride and anger to keep me moving constantly forward. Months turned into a blur of relentless discipline and gradual self-improvement. The man staring back at me in the mirror was shedding his hollow, defeated look, replaced by someone sharp and hungry for progress. The strict routine was no longer a forced march, but a natural rhythm I craved every single morning. I stopped waiting for the future to save me and started building it with my own two hands. The skills I had painstakingly acquired finally reached a critical tipping point in my career. I parlayed that first freelance gig into a solid portfolio, catching the eye of a major tech firm looking for fresh talent. Walking into that interview, I channeled the confident energy of the future self who had been guiding me. I landed the position, securing a salary I previously thought was completely out of reach. Years flowed by, and the once sporadic emails shifted into annual check-ins and strategic advice. I rose through the corporate ranks, eventually breaking off to start my own highly successful consulting firm. The broken 30-year-old was a distant memory, replaced by a wealthy, grounded executive who owned a beautiful home. My life had become the exact picture of success painted in those initial mysterious messages from so long ago. Then came the milestone birthday, the exact date my supposed future self claimed to be writing from. I sat in my spacious home office, a mix of triumph and nervous anticipation swirling in my stomach. I had caught up to the timeline, ready to close the loop on the strangest phenomenon a person could experience. I refreshed my inbox, waiting for the final validation from the ghost in the machine. The final email arrived precisely at midnight, but the tone was remarkably different from the rest. There were no commands, no harsh truths, and no brilliant business strategies to implement. Instead, it instructed me to drive back to my childhood home and inspect the false bottom of my old study desk. A strange, heavy knot formed in my throat as the true weight of the situation began to slowly unfold. I drove through the night, 1,000 questions racing through my mind as the miles disappeared behind me. The house was quiet and dusty, standing exactly as it had been left years ago. I found the old wooden desk in the corner of my childhood room, my hands shaking as I pressed against the hidden panel. It clicked open, revealing a small leather journal and an outdated memory stick. I opened the journal, and the breath was instantly knocked completely out of my lungs. The neat, deliberate handwriting did not belong to a future version of myself, nor was it some cosmic miracle. It was the familiar, comforting script of my late father, who had passed away unexpectedly just months before my life initially collapsed. The dates in the margins corresponded perfectly with every single email I had received. Tears blurred my vision as I realized the immense, heartbreaking depth of what he had done. Knowing his illness was terminal, my father spent his agonizing final months writing a decade worth of scheduled emails. He had watched my early struggles, predicting my eventual breakdown, and engineered a brilliant system to save me. He played the role of my future self because he knew I needed a hero to survive. He knew my mind better than I did, recognizing that I would stubbornly reject basic fatherly advice. By framing the messages as a mystery from my own potential success, he bypassed my defenses and forced me into action. Every harsh instruction, every forced social interaction, and every new skill was carefully chosen by a dying man. He guided me from the grave, pulling me out of darkness with invisible, loving hands. The realization shattered my understanding of the world, but rebuilt it into something infinitely more beautiful. I had not been saved by some magical tear in the fabric of time or a supernatural intervention. I was rescued by the fierce, unwavering dedication of a parent who refused to let his son fade away. The discipline and resilience I developed were my own, but the spark was a gift of pure love. We often look for miraculous signs or shortcuts to pull ourselves out of the deepest valleys in life. But true transformation requires walking through the fire, armed with discipline, uncomfortable choices, and unrelenting inner strength. Even when we feel entirely alone in the dark, the impact of those who loved us is always present. Sometimes, the greatest guide to our future is simply the echoes of the past, pushing us forward.